Lisa Murkowski, senator from Alaska, just for a moment, and listen to a little bit more of what she said earlier this week.
We are all afraid. Okay, I'm oftentimes very anxious myself about using my voice because retaliation is real.
Laura, do other senators feel this way?
Yes, they do. And other senators have said it or expressed it in some form. Senator Tom Tillis has talked about the many death threats that he's get, but she is voicing something that many will say more in private than they do in public. I mean, that being said, this shouldn't really be a surprise to her or to others that Republicans are in this situation, because the administration, even before Trump took office, have repeatedly emboldened extremists and used hate speech to talk about their political enemies. And so this is something that any Republican, you think of the Liz Cheneys, Adam Kinzingers, others of the world, that they've had to deal with for years because they spoke out.
Lisa Murkowski is one of the few Republicans left on the Hill
Senate, yeah,
who voted to convict.
She has immense power with that as well.
Yeah, is she the closest thing now in the Senate to a Mitt Romney now that Romney's gone?
I think she is. I think she's one of the few left out of Republicans in the Senate who is willing to vote against the administration, who is willing to voice opposition to things that they're doing. She has also expressed frustration about the actions of Elon Musk and Doge and was very vocal about that early on.
Yeah. Mark, let me ask you, because something struck me as odd about that statement. Not that it's a reflection, not that it's not a reflection of a certain reality, but, it's odd because she's supposed to be a leader, and being a leader means not expressing that you're scared to lead. Is what's going on here? Is that just a moment of honest honesty?
I think so. I mean, it is so pervasive what she is talking about. I mean, it was almost blurting out that the sky is blue in some ways. I mean, I think, just to be clear too, she's not talking about intimidation, political intimidation, like Elon Musk throwing a bunch of money at an opponent or someone being primary.
So she's actually talking about physical fear.
Physical, and of the death threats, doxing, swatting, all the stuff that goes on, or at least threats thereof that goes on. And just to be clear, I mean, that is that goes on a lot these days. I mean, threats certainly go on a lot, especially since January 6th. It's been a real hallmark of this era. And just to point out, what should be clear, politics, governing is supposed to take place by politics, by persuasion, by debate. Authoritarianism is government by intimidation, by threat, by violence in some cases.
Right. Peter, let me frame this out a little bit more. And I'm not trying to be uncharitable to Senator Murkowski. I understand the nature of the threats that we all live with these days. But she's almost talking about the Josh Shapiro level issue we saw earlier this week, right, of physical intimidation. The question for you, maybe it's a naive one, is, aren't senators among the most protected Americans, the most protected critics?
I mean, they're really not. I mean, the Capitol Police does not shadow every member of Congress, certainly when they're out of town. Only the leadership, yes, and then occasional instances where particular members have particular reasons for threats, they might provide protection. Otherwise, no. They provide their own protection, which they have to pay for out of their campaign funds or whatever else. But that's not
Mitt Romney had to do.
Right. He did have to do that. Liz Cheney does that to this day, as far as I know. I mean, a lot of people have had those kind of threats that have forced them to live their lives in a very different way than there used to be. And senators don't want to, by the way, live with security trailing them around. They want to be open and accessible to their people. It goes against the nature of what our representative government is supposed to be like, but this is the reality today.
But Jeff, I think there is, what you're trying to get at here is that if this is what senators are feeling, if they're this scared and they're willing to tell that to people, how should the normal American feel, right? How should the normal American that is watching what's happening in the country and doesn't like it and feels scared for different reasons, they're looking to those 100 senators and those members of the rest of the members of Congress to say, you're the leaders of our country, help us, right? Those Republicans that are in Alaska that are talking to Lisa Murkowski, who are fearful for whatever reason, they're looking to her for some kind of for her to be sturdy and sure of things. Well, and so that, sure, be honest with folks and talk about how scary things are, but there's another element to this where it doesn't ensure that the people around you feel more confident in you as a leader.
Right. I mean, does this lead to other senators, Republican senators, saying, you know what, Lisa, you're right. We should band together.
No.
We should band together like the law firms have banded together.
Right. No, I think like you're not going to see that because, as we were just saying, there's less and less members of Congress in general who are not a part of the Trump train, who aren't excited about the things that are happening, who aren't going to go out front and do what Lisa Murkowski is doing. She's part of a dying breed of members of Congress and Republicans willing to do the thing. So no, you're not going to see a bunch of people get up and stand outside and talk about how they don't like what Trump is doing, how they don't like what Elon Musk is doing, because they're scared, and whether they're scared of the physical violence or the political.
On the physical violence part, and that has also been seen on both sides too. Of course, President Trump was the target of 2 different assassinations attempts last year. Just this last week, I think the would-be assassin of Brett Kavanaugh was sentenced, I think, in court. Steve Scalise several years ago. But it does seem at times that Trump and his people seem to be more willing to use words like traitor and treasonous that might excite people to take action. And I think that's the worry. What level of responsibility you have as a president, as a leader of this country, to try to tamp down the kind of passions that arise rather than stoke them.
You know, something I've been curious about on the Josh Shapiro attack, which is a serious attack, a serious arson attack. Obviously, we're understanding now that it was an anti-Semitic attack in its nature. But kind of a muted response generally to it. And I'm wondering if you think that if it had been a right-winger and not some anti-Israel guy or something, it would have been a louder outcry.
It's a good question. J.D. Vance did express his concern for Governor Shapiro, said it was an awful thing that had happened, but you didn't hear the president talk about it much. And I think that, you know, what you would have seen under a lot of different presidents is a reckoning, a way of like, let's talk about why our society is like this today and what we can do about it to come together, even as we argue, as we should, about big and serious issues. That's just not Trump's nature as a leader.
And he would set the tone.
He set the tone.
I mean, President Biden often tried to do that, the former president. Sure. You know, he ran on that, saying that he was trying to tone down the rhetoric. But I think what you're seeing from President Trump is, whether it's in the type of language he uses by calling people a traitor or treasonous, he puts a target on multiple people's backs when he specifically names them, when he repeatedly attacks people by name, be it judges, be it lawyers, be it any political enemy that he
I don't know
perceives
anything
to be.
about that.
Yeah, you wouldn't know that.
No, but I mean,
I'm not familiar with this
You've
phenomenon.
never experienced that in
Not
your life.
familiar.
No, I mean, I remember, well, I'm sorry. No, Mitt Romney himself told me, he once said, you know, the first job of a president is not to say something that's going to inflame the random nut. And Trump doesn't have that. And I think he went farther to say something to the degree that he actually will sort of possibly, you know, try to communicate in some way to incite, you know, things that will make people who he disagrees with scared. And that is, you know, that is out there.
And
probably.
Romney has told people that he was told by other Republican senators that they voted against conviction in the second impeachment trial, specifically because they were afraid of their families, for their families.
Absolutely.
Well, that has a real impact beyond just, you know, a nervousness on a part of elected official. It seems to be impacting their votes.
And I think part of the muted response on the Shapiro situation that happened this week is also that we're unfortunately getting used to a lot of this, right? It was a part of the news for a little bit, but, you know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this would have been the only thing we talked about as reporters. It would be the only thing.
Governor's mansion.
It would be the only thing that other members of that members of Congress were talking about. That the
And
president was
normalizing
talking
the
about.
populace to political violence is a trait of authoritarian.
Well, speaking of authoritarianism, good transition. Good all-purpose